Hi, I'm Laura Ingraham reporting tonight for Bill O'Reilly. Thanks for watching us. The fight on the right, that's the subject of this evening's Talking Points memo. We knew the internal discomfort, the disillusionment, and despair on the right couldn't be contained forever. It's been building for years now. Why? Well, disgust with out-of-control spending, fury over the attempted immigration cramdown, and anxiety over the long-term strength of the U.S. economy, just to name a few issues. The old Republican allies of the Reagan era are now in the process of figuring out how to best address the new challenges facing America. Some thought that the Islamic jihadist threat, like the Soviet threat in the 1980s, would bring the old gang of social, fiscal, and foreign policy conservatives back together again. But it hasn't worked out that way. There are real differences among conservatives today, and some just believe that the traditional conservative outlook is totally outmoded. Others, myself included, believe that conservative principles are enduring principles. Edmund Burke, Russell Kirk, William F. Buckley, and Ronald Reagan all understood that with each new generation, new threats would emerge. Threats to American sovereignty, security, and to our economic standing. But those new threats don't require a complete redo of foundational conservative principles. So what are these principles? They include a belief in a strong military, the power of the entrepreneur, a culture that helps strengthen families, not destroy them, letting people keep more of their own money, preserving our national sovereignty, the principles of federalism, the dignity of life from conception to natural death. The GOP candidate who can best speak to all of these enduring conservative values is going to be the nominee of his party. Whether it's Romney, McCain, or Huckabee, in the end, the family fight that conservatives are currently having, it's not a bad thing. Rather, it's clarifying. Soon the air is going to be cleared, and we're going to know where everyone stood and why, and then we'll rally around our candidate. But no Republican should expect that he's going to beat Hillary Clinton or Barack Obama by evolving away from conservative key ideals. And that's the memo. Now for the top story tonight. The fight on the right took center stage at last night's Republican debate.
How would you run against Hillary and Bill Clinton in November?
I frankly can't wait, because the idea of Bill Clinton back in the White House with nothing to do is something I just can't imagine. I can't imagine the American people can imagine.
We'll probably end up borrowing this $150 billion from the Chinese. And when we get those rebate checks, most people are going to go out and buy stuff that's been imported from China. I have to wonder whose economy is going to be stimulated the most by the package.
You haven't voted with your party on some core stances like taxes and judges and immigration and campaign reform. How do you expect to unite a party behind you?
In all due respect, Brian, I love the way you throw all those together.
I believe that I'm going to have the same fate that the New York Giants had last week, and we're going to come from behind and surprise everyone. We have them all lulled into a very false sense of security now.
Come on, that's one big happy family, isn't it? Joining us now from New York is Peggy Noonan, a columnist for the Wall Street Journal. Peggy, your column today was the subject of much of my radio show today, and it was called Breaking Up is Hard to Do, and I want to read part of it for our viewers tonight. On the pundit civil wars, Rush Limbaugh declared on the radio this week, "I'm here to tell you, if either of these two guys, McCain or Huckabee, get the nomination, it's going to destroy the Republican Party. It's going to change it forever, be the end of it." This is absurd. George W. Bush destroyed the Republican Party, by which I mean he sundered it, broke its constituent pieces apart, and set them against each other. He did this on spending, the size of government, war, the ability to prosecute war, immigration, and other issues. Peggy, the Republicans in Congress had something to do with that, didn't they?
Oh, I think so. There were other parts of this. There was one immediate, acute, and essential cause, and I laid it out. But there was a lot of failure to go around. As Mr. McCain always says, there were bridges to nowhere. There was a sense, I think, among what I would call the Republican establishment in Washington, that their job was no longer to be the vehicle of, the carrier of, the encourager of serious philosophy having to do with the role of government in our lives. Instead, they existed to perpetuate themselves. That's all. It came to look like in Washington there were two teams in the past few years, Republicans and Democrats, but they weren't even teams. They were more like gangs fighting over turf, fighting over who'd get the money, give out the money, and get the credit. It was all cynical. It was unhelpful. I think there will be a lot of paying of the price for this, but do I believe that the administration itself took very serious stands or moves to sunder the Republican coalition? I do, and I think it was careless, and I think the entire party now has to re-find its soul and reconstitute itself. It may happen, as you say, in this election. It may happen afterwards.
Peggy, I was looking back at some of your columns from 2004 and, frankly, some of the things I was writing at the time about George W. Bush. And my question is, how could we get it so wrong? Because you had some pretty laudatory things to say about George Bush connecting with the average man. He was connecting with the average guys out there. He wasn't an elitist. He wasn't an intellectual, because intellectuals, they're the ones who can start wars. So how did we get it wrong?
I can only tell you the moment where I started to think, whoa, I've got it wrong, Laura, and it was during Mr. Bush's second